VCT Americas Stage 1 2025 is just around the corner, so it's time to talk about each fan base of these 12 teams and talk about how they're feeling heading into this stage. This is a very crucial part of the season. In fact, we've already seen a lot of roster changes knowing how important this next little bit is. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So this is the board we have today. Now we've done panic rankings in the past, but we'll go through how it works again. At the very top, we have Chad. So these are teams that are feeling really good right now, not panicking, feeling nice about how they're going. Probably not going to be a ton of teams in this category. Right down below that, we have Hopium, so teams that still have a lot of hope for the rest of the season. Right down below that, we have Copium, so teams that still think they have a shot, but maybe didn't have the best start that they wanted. Down below, we have Panic, pretty self-explanatory, they're panicked. And right down below that, we have the Cursed Wojak, so basically no hope for the season at this point, just completely in the dumps. We will be going in alphabetical order, which means we are starting with the numbered teams, which means 100 Thieves is the first team we have to talk about, and I think it's pretty fair to put them in the Copium area. I think mid-range is about where both fans of 100 Thieves and fans of Valorant in general probably have them. There are reasons to be optimistic about 100 Thieves, but there's also reasons to be pessimistic. Personally, I'm more on the pessimistic side. If I was a huge follower of this team, I'd probably be a little bit panicked. However, they at least looked decent at kickoff. They had an unfortunate loss to Energy to kick them out of that tournament. And when they lost that at the time, it was like, oh, they lost to one of the better teams in the Americas. And then Energy did not end up being one of those teams. So how do you really evaluate that loss? So overall, I think in the mid-range is about where they should be. But I personally don't have a ton of confidence in this roster right now. But maybe they prove me wrong. Moving on to 2G, the newest Ascension team in the Americas. I think they're pretty much just down here. They were one of the teams that only played 2 matches at kickoff, and they looked pretty abysmal in both of them. Losing against Furia, that was running a sub-roster at the time, and then getting absolutely manhandled by Crew. Things do not look good for this team. Now they've lost another player in Prize. He has moved on to Furia. That was a recent announcement, so you're already losing players off your roster. You still don't have Spike. Spike can't play until June. He definitely will sub in, and maybe the team can have some hope during that stage. But right now, it's just looking all bad. We don't know who their 5th is gonna be. It's not looking great for 2G right now. Moving on, we have C9, a team that could go in a variety of different categories, but I think that I'm going to put them down in the panic region right now. So C9 are a funny team because they are the most consistent team in all of Valorant, because they start the year, they win the first match, then they lose the next one, sometimes the next 2, then they go on to have a really good stage 1 and look like one of the best teams, if not the best team in the Americas region, and then they quickly lose in the playoff bracket, and then the rest of the season is pretty much just done. What I just explained to you is how C9's season went in 2024 and 2023, and so far in 2025 looking very similar. So I do expect this team to have a good stage 1. I expect them to do pretty well in the round robin. So why would I put them in panic? Because I think this is a story that we have seen before with this team. And if things do change for this team, I think it's more likely they end up going in the negative route than the positive. While they did get that nice upset win against Energy at kickoff, the rest of their tournament did not go their way. Losing to G2 isn't a big deal. They ended up being incredibly good, but then you lost to MIBR, a team that also looked quite good, but you should have been able to beat most likely. Also, Oxy didn't have a great tournament. That's a concerning sign. If he's going to have a down year, then C9 is going to have a rough one. Again, I'm not going to be surprised if this team has a good round robin in stage 1, but if they end up losing in the playoff bracket yet again, that's not going to shock me either. So I do think it's fair enough to put them in the panic section because things just seem like it's Groundhog Day for this team over and over again. Moving on to Evil Geniuses, I think a fair place to put them is probably Copium. Could be lower, but I think I'm going to put them in Copium. Bit of a weird team at kickoff. They lose to Loud, who looked a lot better than what people were expecting. Then you beat Furia, but then you lose to MIBR right away. So definitely not the result that they wanted. And in terms of their new additions in Ye and Icy, it's been an up and down experience so far. Both Ye and Icy have had good maps at kickoff, but then had maps where they didn't look very hot at all. Ye especially is one to watch. I thought heading into the season he was going to be their main Sentinel player, but now they're putting him as the flex player, and I just don't know if that's the direction that we should put Ye in. I thought he looked quite good on Vise in the offseason, so I was excited to see more of that. He's playing Chamber again, but on Split, which is Chamber's worst map, so don't understand that at all. So I'm not panicked about the roster because there still are good things to look at, reasons to be optimistic, but also not a lot there for me to have a ton of hope in their roster just yet. Moving on, we have Furia, a team that is going to be in the lower half of this. They had a lot of unfortunate things happen to them at kickoff. They had to play with a sub roster because their roster did not get visas until it was too late. So they didn't get a lot of practice time, then they lose their only 2 matches that they played. So pretty unfortunate right there. Now they've lost MW Zera due to health issues, so Prize is coming in from 2G. We'll see how that goes. None of the 2G players had good kickoffs, so not much to go off of there yet. So I think overall, this whole mix of things doesn't put them in the depths, which if there wasn't the visa issues, they probably would be, because then it would have just shown that the roster is just bad. But I think panic is a fair place to put them. They did have that one good offseason event. Maybe the team that team looked like is still in here somewhere. But right now it just seems like Furia is destined to be at the bottom of both the standings as well as any rankings. Maybe there is more with this team. Brazilian fans, I am sorry, but every time I try to give your teams the benefit of the doubt, a lot of them prove me right. But hey, there's still 2 more Brazilian teams to go, and I'm quite optimistic about both of them, so we'll get to those in a bit. Moving on, we have G2, a team that did make it to the grand final of VCT Masters Bangkok, proving once again that America's teams do quite well at the first international of the year. However, unlike some of those teams that brought home a trophy at that first international, G2 were not able to do it. So based off of that, there are 2 sides to it. Again, the optimistic and the pessimistic way to look at it. In terms of the optimism side, they've come so far in such a short amount of time this season, making it to that grand final, looking like the best team in the world for much of that tournament until the final hour. But then there's a pessimistic side where you can think that maybe that ends up being their only chance. I personally do not believe that, but when it comes to grand finals, you never know if you're going to make it there again. It is hard to make it to multiple grand finals, and it's even harder to win one of them. So in terms of this ranking, I could put them in hopium because they lost, but I still think they're riding pretty high. Again, they still look like such an amazing team. They've made a ton of progress. This team just keeps improving. They've proven in the past that they can use their losses to better themselves as a team. Valen especially is very good at doing that as the leader of this team. Jogramo had an inconsistent kickoff, but then really heated up at that Bangkok tournament, so that's great to see. So we'll see where it ends up going for this G2 roster. I'm still very high on them. I think they're capable of winning a tournament this year. They lost a grand final that was essentially the closest grand final that we have ever had in the VCT, so I can't fault them too much for that. I still think this team's quite good, and I think their fan base should still be pretty satisfied. Moving on, we have Crew, and I think Hopium is definitely the place to put them, our first Hopium team. Crew looked really rough at the start of kickoff, but then they ended up having a very good lower bracket run. Getting to top 4, just couldn't beat out MIBR for that top 3 spot, but this team has shown a lot of improvement from last year. I did not expect them to get as far as they did at kickoff, and they looked pretty solid overall. They were playing some old comps at kickoff, but Adam said that was basically just a lack of practice thing. So now that they've had more time, there's more of a chance that they play with some newer compositions, maybe play with some G2 comps or something like that. Very interested to see how their compositions end up looking. I think this team has a lot of talent on it, and I'm very excited to see how they do. The one thing about Crew is they usually have pretty inconsistent years. They always make it to champs, of course, but the rest of the season before champs usually ends up being kind of up and down for them. 2024, they had a good stage 1. They could probably replicate it here. I do have confidence in this team right now. Will they make it to an international that isn't champions? Well, we will see. Moving on, we have Leviathan. Now, I could put this team in panic, but I think overall fair place to put them is Copium. They definitely had a pretty weird kickoff. They get that pretty easy win over Furia. They go face G2. They get pretty punked on. And then they face off against MIBR and lose a pretty close match. But now they've made the roster change where Natank is now off the roster. Their European import who moved continents to come play for the team. He is now off the team, but now they have Rossi, and I think that that's a pretty interesting pickup that could potentially be an upgrade. Of course, the main argument for people against the move is that Natank plays Raze, and Demon 1 has been playing Raze on this Leviathan roster to not that very good of an effect. Demon 1 on Raze historically has not gone very well for him, especially with Double Duelist now being seen as a pretty viable option. If they still had Natank, they could put him on Raze, and then they could put Demon 1 on Jet or on Smokes. Demon 1 basically had 2 pretty terrible matches at kickoff, then one really good one against MIBR. So the one that they lost is where he performed well in. So I don't know what that says about how how Demon 1 is going to do for the rest of the year. This is my problem with starting the year with brackets. I much prefer if we go into something like stage 1 right away instead of a bracket, but that's just me. Esports loves their brackets. But Leviathan, I still think there is some pretty decent talent on there. Demon 1 can still have a bounce back season. Rossi, I think, is going to be a very good addition for them. Rossi was looking really good on C9, but he gets kicked off that roster. Now he can get his revenge. There's reasons to be optimistic. There's reasons to panic as well, but for now, I think fans should give them the benefit of the doubt until we see things go wrong. Moving on, we have Loud. I don't think that there's too many places to put them aside from Hopium. This team ended up looking a lot better than what I think a lot of people were expecting them to, myself included. I actually had them last on my power rankings heading into kickoff, and they made me look like a fool pretty quickly. And this team did have a pretty disappointing end to kickoff after looking absolutely solid in their first 2 matches, beating both Evil Geniuses and then Crew, and then losing to Sentinels and losing the rematch against Crew. Their new additions have really worked so far. Digizin has been an amazing duelist player for them. Vinny as an IGL is putting up some very impressive numbers while seemingly being pretty good at the whole IGLing thing. However, my main concern with Digizin is, can he put together a good string of games consistently? He absolutely has some amazing talent. He's great with the op. Can he be a top player all the time? Not many players can be perfect all the time, obviously, but Digizin has shown that he can fall off quite a bit sometimes. But this new Loud roster seems to have some pretty good cohesion for them going so far, so I think there's definitely reasons to be hopeful. So even though their end to the kickoff was pretty disappointing, they could have beat Sentinels, they got pretty close, I still think this team has some pretty good gas in them left. Moving on, we have MIBR, and I think they're going to go in the same spot. This team ended up getting top 3 at kickoff, which I think is a result that not a lot of people, including themselves, expected. This team with 2 rookies in both Cortesia and Genome. It was unknown how well they were going to do, but they ended up holding their own quite a bit. They definitely looked like rookies at times, but a lot of other times they were having some pretty impressive maps. However, they have recently made a roster change. It's not 100% confirmed who the new player is, but it is heavily rumored to be Verno in for Noswer. And of course, people are making comparisons to when Leviathan dropped Noswer, but I think context is important here. That Leviathan team ended up having a big fight with each other, not getting along, and a decision had to be made. When it comes to MIBR though, Noswer was meant to be their IGL, now Artsine is the IGL. He seems to be doing a pretty good job at it, while Noswer on the initiator role had a really rough kickoff. He was one of the lowest performing players in the entire kickoff bracket, despite his team going pretty deep. So this roster change seems to be more off of performance, and I don't think that that's going to mean that Ospos is going to hate it here like he did with Leviathan after Noswer was dropped. I think Ospos is going to be fine. I am curious about the Verno edition if that ends up going through. Verno looked incredible in the offseason, so in terms of firepower, he's probably going to be an upgrade on Noswer. However, now there's going to be a language barrier. I don't know how many of the players on MIBR speak like perfect English. I know Ospos speaks English. I know Cortesia does. Artsin, I think, as well. Not sure about Genome there. So in terms of comms, is that going to throw everything off? Are they going to have to like translate a lot of things to Verno? Of course, there's the joke that Verno doesn't comm, so it doesn't matter, but hey, communication is very important for any team, no matter the player. But Verno should be able to perform well on this team. I think he's going to get the space to do what he needs to do. And hopefully he finds a pretty good home on this MIBR roster that has a lot of rookies now. That would be my main concern with them, is that there is now just Ospos and kind of Artsin as the veteran presence on this team. So we'll see how that affects the team chemistry, but I definitely still have a lot of hope in this team. Do they make it international? I don't know, but I think they absolutely have that ability. Moving on, we have Energy, and I feel like I could give them the benefit of the doubt here, but I'm gonna put them in panic. They've already made a roster change. Verno is off the roster. The coach has been changed as well. Brock is now their new player. He's been waiting for his shot at tier 1 for quite some time, so I am hopeful that he has a good time on this team. In terms of the coaching change, I don't know how this is gonna go. Mike's hasn't coached in tier 1 for quite some time, and the last time he did it on 100 Thieves, it did not go very well. There is reason to think that the new additions could end up being quite beneficial for them, but I don't know, there just seems to be this weird air around Energy that this team is just always gonna fall short. But maybe that's just me, maybe their fans have a lot more hope in them than I do, but I don't know. I think panic is where I would put them and where I think fans should be. And last but not least, we of course have Sentinels. Now this is a weird team to talk about for this video. They had an up and down kickoff that did end up with them in the grand final, so they made it to Bangkok. They did lose that grand final against G2, but they still were in Bangkok, so who cares? But then at Bangkok, they lost their only 2 matches in quite spectacular fashion, getting destroyed by Team Liquid on that last map 13-1. So while they did show that they could make it to international tournaments, I think they got exposed that they definitely have a lot of holes right now. There seems to be a communication problem, their map pool isn't as deep as it was before. Zekin, while still talented, is struggling without Tens on his team to back him up, and there's just an overall air of uncertainty when it comes to this team, but I still think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful. They still have a lot of talent on their roster. Narrate does seem to have some problems with emotions during games, but he still was their top performer at that Bangkok tournament, so hey, he's still a pretty good player. If he can just, work out some of his whole mental stuff, I think he can be good. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze him or anything. I'm just saying he still seems like he needs to get over some jitters. But I still do have confidence in Sentinels, but is the fan base feeling super confident right now? I think Copium is fair right now. It's not panic, it's not doom and gloom, but Hopium, I mean, maybe, but I feel like Copium right now, just because of how poorly Bangkok went. It really can't be understated how bad they looked. So there you have it. There are the VCT Americas pre-Stage 1 Panic rankings. Let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think of these rankings? Where would you put these teams? Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.